Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Very excited to talk to Lucy and Jerzy about understanding kids comics, the business and craft of kids comics. I'm Sara Phoebe Miller. I'm the Editorial Director at Boom Studios, and with a focus on our YA and middle grade comics and graphic novels for the imprints Boombox and Kaboom. I was formerly an editor for over 10 years at DC Comics, where I also focused on DC's books for young readers, young adult and middle grade graphic novels. And as of March, I published my first graphic novel called You Belong Here, young adult graphic novel published by First Second with art by the incredible Morgan Beam. So I feel so lucky to be here with Lucy, Knisley, and Jerzy Drozd.
Yep.
I second-guessed myself. I said it right the first time, and since then it's been a mess. Lucy, if you don't know, is the critically acclaimed and award-winning comic creator. She specializes in personal, confessional, graphic novels, and travelogues. She has written and drawn books for adults, teens, and kids, as well as all ages. And her latest graphic novel, Sugar Shack, came out in August and is the third book in the absolutely delightful Peapod Farm series. Love those books. Jerzy Drozd is the author of the inscrutable Dr. Bear and the Case of the Two-Faced Statue. He co-authored the graphic novel Science Comics, Rockets, with his wife Anne, and he is one of the artists of the Warren Commission report. He leads cartooning workshops for children and teens in libraries and schools, as well as for teachers who want to bring comics to the classrooms. Jerzy lives right here in Columbus with his wife and 4 cats, which is notable because I also have 4 cats, and Lucy has at least one.
I have 2.
2.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
Cat people, we will definitely be discussing the influence of cats in your comics in a little bit. So to start, can you each talk about your origins in the industry? What was it like breaking into comics or graphic novels? And what was that aha moment when you knew this was the path you wanted to go down?
Sure. I'm mic'd, right? You can hear me? Okay. The comics have always been very appealing to me. I loved reading them as a kid. Obviously, I didn't have the wealth of kids' comics that we have in this modern time. There's so many amazing artists and writers making books, and kids they're so spoiled. They're so spoiled for choice with these wonderful books. But I grew up reading Calvin and Hobbes, Archie comics, stuff in the newspaper, whatever I could get my hands on. And I was always frustrated that there wasn't more, that I wanted more. I wanted stories that reflected my own personal experiences and my identity. And so I thought about making them from an early age. I had a teacher when I was in elementary school who taught me how to make zines, which was revolutionary. It was something that I think a lot of first graders don't really learn. They aren't really taught, but it made this connection between the books that I loved and things that I could make from an early age, and I think that's so cool. So I really try to encourage zine making for younger audiences because they can have this amazing experience of getting to make their own book. So I was taught that. I started making zines about stuff that freaked me out, about stuff that was scary to me, which at the time I was really scared of snakes. I am still really scared of snakes. I wish them well, just away from me. So I would make zines about snakes and snake facts to try and exorcise these snake demons from my body. And it was really interesting to me that I was able to kind of put my feelings on the page and have them understood by other people. So I was hooked from a very, very early age on this form of communication.
Amazing. What about you?
I just want, if I could just respond to
Sure.
that, is that I immediately thought of Fred Rogers, whatever can be mentioned can be managed.
Yeah.
Like you were intuiting that at a young age.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I was also a huge Mr. Rogers fan, so I feel like
what I hear is that was a resourced child. That's pretty awesome. Well, I feel like what we're talking about is aesthetic arrest. You know, you heard that term before? Joseph Campbell uses it a lot. Sorry, I mentioned Joseph Campbell. But it's
Is that a problem?
Well, I mean, it's just it feels like it's such a cliche for a storytelling to go, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. But one of the things he talks about, I do, as you mentioned in my bio workshops with kids, I spend a lot of time in school residencies, and I talk to them about like everybody has something that makes them go like, right? And like it just happens that was comics for me. And to the exclusion of all else, and it took all the way to me turning 50 to finally say like, I bet other art is cool too. And so I started doing watercolor painting and ceramics, and it's like, oh my gosh, what was I denying myself? But as a child, I remember it was the summer of 1985. It was a DC comic. It was Crisis on Infinite Earths #3. I remember the way the air smelled. And I was only 10, so I didn't have the words for what was happening, but I put the book down and I almost felt like I was out of breath. I was like, whatever that was, like that's it forever. To you know, like I said, to the exclusion of all else, which I think in retrospect wasn't the best thing in the entire world. You know, I'm starting to undo all of that by exploring new art, but yeah, and then breaking in, being possibly the oldest person on the panel. When I was starting, it was the early 90s, and it was a very different time in comics where most comics were sold as magazines. They weren't graphic novels, so you got a job at a company drawing somebody else's characters. And so my first published work came out in, I think, 1998, and it was for a company called Antarctic Press. Anybody know Ninja High School? See, it's an old book. But it was.
There's one hand.
Was it one hand? Okay, so yeah, that's where I got my start. I did a little bit of Ninja High School work, and then it's been sporadic ever since, like a little bit of work here, a little bit of work there. I think in my 30 years of doing this, I've made my living as a cartoonist only about one. I've always had to do other things too. So.
Wow, amazing. I love that. Can you each both talk about your process as well? What does it look like when you first sit down and start a new project? And then what does it look like when you're putting the finishing touches on something?
Sure. You know, there's no definitive start and end to most creative projects, no matter what medium it's in, but I've been doing comics for a while. Practice is all that separates me from somebody who doesn't make comics. It's just a matter of practice. When I go and teach at schools and do workshops for kids, a lot of the times, you know, the kids will ask like, how do you get good at art? And it's like, that's it. It's just the practice. And it's the same with the professional part of it. Like, you have to practice getting up and sitting at your desk and treating it as a job and staying there as long as you can until you can't anymore. So I work from 9 to 3. I keep school hours generally because I have a 9-year-old and I want to go pick them up. So I try to work within those school hours, but I'm at my desk for that whole time. I'm in my studio at least for that whole time. And my practice includes other art as well, which is really important for creatives to sort of build your creative practice around diverse, different stuff that you can try and do, because it all feeds into the same sort of flow. So I'm currently working on a number of things at the same time, and that's also really important to my process, because if I'm sick of something, I can move on to something else that I'm working on. So I try to do very different things. So I usually have a graphic novel and a picture book going at the same time, as well as like various craft projects and things, so that when I'm sick of one thing, I can switch over to another, and then if I'm sick of that, I can switch back. And so when I start out professionally with a graphic novel, I will make a book proposal, which is usually some drawings and maybe a layout, like a synopsis, some descriptions of the characters, and I will hand that off to my agent. I have a literary agent, which is great for those of us that don't really understand legalese very much. I didn't go to law school, I went to art school, and so I have a literary agent who helps me parse those things and keeps me safe from bad deals with publishers. And so I will hand it off to her, and she will pass it around, and then hopefully a publisher will like it and want to buy it. And then I begin the process of making the book once the publisher has bought it. That's not how every book goes. Some books I had it almost done when a publisher was interested in it. I was just doing it in my sketchbook, publishing it online, that sort of thing. So it's different every time, but I'm in there, I'm in the studio working every day, the same hours that my kid goes to school.
Cool.
Can I ask you to say a little bit more about the question?
Sure. Actually, I can definitely expand. I have some bonus questions under the main question.
Please.
Jerzy, if you could talk about your process specifically, either working alone as a writer artist and or with your wife, and then and also how does it differ when you're working by yourself on your own project, like The Inscrutable Bear, or you're working with a partner?
Yeah, well, so The Inscrutable Dr. Bear, I should say, is a book that I wanted to do for 20 years, but couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with it. And so he was just a character that lived in sketchbooks for a long time until finally. This is what I tell my students. I always carry a sketchbook on my person. I came in with my shoulder bags. I always take it with me because I was in the produce section at Meijer. I was by the cabbages when the idea finally happened, like, oh, that's what the book's about. And I was able to capture it in my sketchbook really fast. And that one is certainly a very personal work to me. It feels like everything in it is mine, and it's all an expression of what I wanted to say to my 10-year-old self who fell in love with comics and who was a sensitive, weird kid who didn't feel safe in the world. Like, this is for you. I'm making this totally for you. So that one, how does it feel different? What's the process? The process was very internal. I did, I think, like 6 drafts of a mind dump in a Google Doc, and then I do sticky note thumbnails. I print that out and I break out all the sections into, like, that feels like it's a page. Each page can hold about 3 actions, something like that. And I'll mark all those out, and then I'll do sticky note thumbnails where I'm not doing the dialogue. All I'm figuring out is big panel, small panel, close, far away. And then I go to a second draft, and this is where my students start rolling their eyes back, and they're like, you draw the pages 3 times? I'm like, yeah, we do it 3 times. And so I do a second sketch where it's like, okay, I figured out big panel, small panel, close, far away. Now I'm gonna figure out the dialogue and the balloon spotting and that level of composition and character voice and everything. And that's mostly done on my own, where then I'll show it to, trusted friends and advisors afterwards, but it's a lot of myself. With Rockets, that I worked on with Anne, that was, oh gosh, I'm married to this amazing woman who knows how to organize information. I don't know if she's in here or not, so I'm saying, I would say this regardless. Everybody who knows me knows this. She's super awesome. She works at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library Museum, and the woman is a marvel at organizing thought. That is like the chief reason she was put on this planet, I think, sometimes, is like, you're here to make thought clear. And so she and I just got to sit there and do my intellectual version of vomiting on a table. And she was like, oh, that's this, that's that. This is how this will be organized into sections of the book. And so she came up with the idea of how the entire structure of the book worked. And there was just a lot of date nights were spent going to the university library and getting research materials, because it was a nonfiction book about the history and science of rockets. But there was still very personal stuff in there that we share, because if anybody hasn't heard of the Science Comics series, is anybody familiar with the Science Comics series from First Second? A few of us. Yeah, it's a bunch of graphic novels, but they're not novels. They're I would call them comics documentaries about different scientific subjects. And our book was about the history and science of rockets, because we're big NASA nerds. That's why they asked us to do it. And we are both vegetarian for principled reasons, not for health reasons, because we think animals are awesome. And I can't remember if it was me or Anne, but I'm sure it sort of emerged through our conversations, this is an opportunity to explore our relationship with animals through the history of how animals participated in rocket history. So the narrators of the book are the animals who were part of rocket history, and they're joyfully talking about, how aren't rockets cool? And then it's like, oh yeah, and the bear was talking about, I love rockets so much. Like, oh yeah, you remember how bears got used to test ejector seat technology? We tranked bears and shot them out of planes, and the bear gets mad and walks off the book. And it's funny, and it's meant to invite you in to say, oh, it's so funny that a bear got shot out of a plane. Wait a minute, a bear got shot out of a plane, right? So instead of us wagging our finger at the audience, this is all Anne. This is the way she treats all other humans with dignity, and it's one of the reasons I'm crazy about her. Is she's like, we can't yell at people, but we can invite them in with a gag, right? And then get them to stop, laugh, consider, oh, right? So
I think comics does that remarkably well, better than prose books, because you can read so much in the image and the action and the expression and stuff, and see the bear's outrage kind of thing.
It was such a great entry point in, and unexpected to pick up a book about science, comics, rockets, and have animals as the main characters pretty much walking you through it, and then also taking how animals were involved in the history of rockets that struck me as unexpected but really great.
I at the risk of being a mouse, I think it's the funniest comic with my name on it, and it's mostly because of Anne, because she has a really, really awesome sense of humor. At the same time, it's like safely inviting you into this space of considering without yelling at you.
Yeah.
So that was the personal aspect of it. But then like most of our date nights was spent at the university library for 8 months, like just collecting your resources to like find out stories we didn't know about rockets. So that part was super fun.
That's awesome. I was surprised there were just not a lot of cats in it.
Yeah, well, there was a story that we didn't put in it about Félicette, the French space cat, who I think has a monument now in France. And it's a tough story to look at because you see these cats lined up in boxes with these little things sticking out of their head. They put electrodes on them, and then the scientists would come in and like whack pans to see who had the steeliest nerves, who could handle the noise of a rocket. So it's like, as a cat lover, it's like, this needs to be told because people need to see it and like experience that wincing that we all just did. But at the same time, it's like, it's tough to draw, man.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's also interesting because it could be presented in a darker, more mature way.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know too, getting back to sort of the business of kids comics, and Lucy, you've written basically something for everyone, like I said, from adults down to babies practically. What do you think about when you're creating something specifically for a younger demographic? Does anything change about your process, or how do you find ways to be sort of honest in your work while being sensitive to that demographic?
Well, I think it's like what Jerzy said, you're sort of making it for your 10-year-old self. You think about what you would have wanted to read at that time, and certainly for my middle grade series, what I really wanted to read when I was that age was more stories about kids going through divorce and family changes and blended families. And at the time that I was going through that, it just felt so unusual, like I was the only one that had ever experienced it. And obviously, like tons and tons of people experienced it, but I wasn't seeing it reflected in the comics and the books that I was reading. So that was something that I was considering when I started making these books. I wanted also, I'm very passionate about food and eating and our food systems, and I wanted to sneakily teach kids about that. Also, like, you know, not yelling at anybody, not lecturing, but I wanted to talk about the stewards of the land and the people that make the food and where the food comes from, because so many kids, especially in America, only experience where their food comes from when they go to the grocery store. They're just like, that's where food comes from. But I grew up partially in farm country and around the stewards of the land, and so I wanted to tell the story about it because it was something that connected me much more to where I grew up, to know that really good food comes from people that grow it and land that grows it. So the series is about a kid whose parents are divorced, and she has to move from the city to the country, and she sort of comes to terms with this place that she doesn't connect with right away, through understanding how being a part of growing that food and making that food can be so fun and makes the food more delicious. So that's my like little sneaky teachy part of the books, but it's mainly just that I wanted to kind of celebrate the things that I loved as a kid. The kid's an artist, and she finds a lot of solace in the work that in her sketchbook and stuff like that. I find kids comics and writing for adults very, very similar. There's not a lot of difference to it, in my opinion. Though I will say that I think that my kids' comics are more show, don't tell than the adult comics. I feel that adults have a little more capacity for reading narration and text than kids. I tend to show more through the actions in kids' comics.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
To build on what you said, again, making the thing for your younger self, and then I really want to dig at this idea about like the difference between like show, don't tell, because like I have my own hypothesis on this. So I grew up in the 80s in central Michigan in a rural community, 250 kids in my school, K to 12, right? And it's the 80s. So when I think about the way media was portrayed, like I was a huge Indiana Jones fan. I loved the first movie I saw in the theater by myself was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, right? And the thing that I always think of is that scene in the first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? The scene, okay, so there's a scene where Indiana Jones is chasing Marion because she's captured by bad guys, because that's what you did back then. You just chase, the hero has to chase the girl who needs to be saved, because we didn't know women were any good
Obviously.
yet, right? Yeah. But so there's that problem. But there's a part where the crowd parts and there's a guy with a scimitar, and he's like menacingly flipping the scimitar, and then Indiana Jones like looks tired, pulls out his gun and shoots him. And it's cathartic because there was menace and there was the implication of an exciting action scene that is diffused by a single gunshot. Now, when I was a kid, I was like, well, he just murdered that guy. He didn't have to do that. And everybody around me is really happy, right? Like, I'm like, I don't get this. And all media taught, like Back to the Future, it's like you gotta teach your dad to beat up people so that he can have you as a kid, right? All images of manliness were portrayed as physically overcoming somebody else, right? So the inscrutable Dr. Bear in the case of the Two-Faced statue was my attempt to figure out, can I do something that has all of the thrill and catharsis of action and adventure where it's not about pounding a guy down into the dust, right? Can I have a guy who's a real man who actually like uses empathy and caring? Now there were examples from that time that like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is actually about a guy in furry underpants with a sword, right? You watch the cartoon, he never uses the sword to hurt anybody. And like, there's even a part where Skeletor rips a tree out of the ground, and He-Man says, "I don't like people who hurt trees." And I'm like, okay, and everybody's like, "Oh, but it's about like barbarian fighting." Like, it started out that way, but the cartoon did something different. But most of the examples, like think about representation in media, were about like men look like Harrison Ford and they shoot people, right? And I was like, but I hate it. And I remember I went on the playground one day and I'm like, well, this is what you do after all. And I punched a kid. I went up to a kid and I just punched him.
Wow.
Now I didn't hurt him. I did not hurt him. I was a skinny little boy. But when I felt my bones hit his bones, I'm like, that's the worst thing I've ever felt in my life.
Wow.
I hate this. I never want to do it again, right? So again, thinking about like what I tell my students is, where were the times in life where you felt confused and the world is not stepping up to explain to you why you're confused? That's the art you got to make, right? Like for me, that's my answer to it. And then to go on the idea of show, don't tell, and narration, I'm going to advocate for kids here a little bit as somebody who works a lot with children. I know you have kids. I'm not trying to like, I'm not turning this into an argument, but like, I do wonder if there's something about, there's a deeper and more profound sophistication in the way they consume images that we lose as adults when we do real reading, right? I do wonder about that a lot, because I just did a lesson. I do a lesson in my class where I have the kids watch the 1985 Voltron intro and then the 2016 Voltron intro, and we talk about what do they change to make this for a different audience, right? And the kid in the original Voltron intro, if you've ever seen it, is like, it's just Peter Cullen saying, "From days of long ago, from uncharted regions of the universe comes a legend, the legend of Voltron, defender of the universe, a mighty robot, loved by good, hated by evil." And the 2016 one, there's no narration. It's just music, and they do everything visually. They tell you about every character just in the way they move on the screen. And the kid's like, well, the old one was for older people because it has more talking. I'm like, wow, that's fascinating to me that we have that assumption that if there's more like language that's not visual language, it's somehow for older people. I feel like that's kind of encoded into our culture in a way. But again, hypothesis, I don't have a degree. Don't follow my blog.
No, that's so fascinating because I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I love where this is going, which is like kids' comics and graphic novels have exploded over the past 10 years. As you said, Lucy, we didn't have it the way kids today have it when we were younger. And my hypothesis is there's something to the rise of social media and the way we share experiences, culture, communicate is hyper visual now in a way that it wasn't maybe 15, 20 years ago. Do you think social media has played a role in the rise of kids' comics and graphic novels? Or if not, what is it that has led to the explosion we've seen in the industry?
What I've noticed a great deal is that there's more creators now. And I think a lot of them, like us, want to make the work that they wanted as kids, and that's why they're all making these incredible books. And I have this incredibly literate 9-year-old. They've read more comics than I have read in 40 years in just the past few years. And it's awesome because they're all wonderful books from diverse voices and they're beautiful artwork. And I think my kid is becoming really, really visually literate. Like they really understand the expressions of the characters and the sort of the idea of what happens between the panels and stuff. It's baked in to the way that they read. And they read other books, they read non-comics, and that's fine too, but they prefer comics. And I think we all do. I mean, we're here. We all do. We all prefer comics. Like, I prefer comics. I love to read them. I read a lot of audiobooks. I'm a big audiobook reader because I can draw at the same time. But we start out reading picture books. We all start out with the understanding of this is how you tell a story. There's a sequential narrative, and there's images to look at, and it's very engaging, and you get to explore the images with your eyes and with your senses, and it adds a sensory experience to the reading. And that's how we all start out. And then at a certain point, there's someone in our lives that says that we have to stop looking at pictures when we read. And I think that that's really sad. And I think it's happening less because people are able to say, oh, well, have you read this? Can you read this? This is also great. And it encourages kids to read these graphic novels. So I just think that there's more of them now. And so I think that we're able to have that resource that we didn't have at a certain point where it was like, okay, well, I'm out of picture books and I'm out of comics, so I guess I have to read these because everybody is telling me that I have to read them. Whereas now you have the option of reading a graphic novel that is really wonderful and literate and beautiful to look upon. And I think educators, librarians, and parents are getting on board. Not everybody and not at the same rate, but they are getting on board. And it's so cool to see how excited kids get about books and about reading. And we all love that, and we want that. And so we encourage these books that they love and they want. So then there are more creators making them, and it's a sort of a cyclical thing. I think that when it comes to kids, social media isn't as much of a aspect to this, because I think that kids aren't on social media, but we all are. So as adults, we were coming up at a time when we saw people making comics more on their webcomics, on their blogs and stuff, and it became this idea that like, oh, I could do that too. So now there's more creators, which is really wonderful. So I think social media has gifted us with that for sure. But I think when it comes to kids, it's probably just more about the fact that there's so much out there.
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's hard for me to explain how bleak things felt in 1997 in comics, in the sense that, again, it was a magazine business and it was mostly almost entirely superheroes. And I'm not going to name the podcast, but there was a comics podcast that was very popular in like the early aughts, where it was just readers talking about what comics they loved. And I'll never forget, as somebody who, I decided when I was 19, I'm like, I'm only making comics for kids, because I want to support the people I want to support people through comics the way I needed that support as a child in comics. And there was this roundtable discussion where somebody said, what if they made a Batman comic for kids? And this was a novel idea in 1990 or by the 2002 or whatever. And I remember one of the hosts was almost frothing. He was so angry at the idea of a child getting to read Batman. He's like, no, Batman's for me. Batman's for me. So that's how bleak things felt. I felt like, well, there's really no place for me in the comics industry, because it's really meant for making fantasy adventure stories for 30, 40-year-old dudes who look like this, right? And I think social media, and what Lucy said is like the fact that there was places like Girl-O-Matic, and that there were people of different backgrounds and people who have different lifestyles who suddenly could see that they were all doing it, and so they could say, okay, I might belong here. Again, I'm going back to that podcast. That podcast said to me, you don't get to be here. And when I got my first taste of that, I was like, okay, well, maybe I won't, right? But when I think having the internet let people see like, oh no, other people are doing this, even if these yahoos are all yelling at each other about it's only for me, I get to be here too. And I mean, that and then the big 5 publishers discovering comics changed everything. Like, it went from me feeling like, well, maybe I'll just make comics for myself and not just show them to my friends, to, oh, we all get to be here? Oh, thank God, right? So, we are spoiled, but it can always be more.
Oh, yeah. I want to be incredibly spoiled.
Not enough. No, that's so fascinating, because it's almost like social media became a tool for accessibility, and it just made me think of Tumblr maybe being the most like relevant when it comes to that. And
I liked LiveJournal.
LiveJournal. LiveJournal's great. Not trying to say anything bad about LiveJournal, but I think about like N.D. Stevenson, whose platform really grew from Tumblr, and the adults that were following these artists that it kind of took away the like Marvel DC gatekeepers and opened it up to a whole bunch of different creators all of a sudden that had visibility because of the internet, and I just find that so fascinating.
It's
and the
really
correlation
refreshing
there.
to talk about social media as a positive
I
thing.
know. Yeah, right. This is so nice. Wow.
I don't think of these things as social media either. Like you talked about Girl-O-Matic, that was sort of this almost a message board, like a comics collective online, and I don't think of that as social media. It was sort of early days of social media.
I mean, yeah, you would comment on the comics,
Yeah.
and then there was like a forum,
Yeah.
you know, BB Press forum or whatever they were called, and like, that's where you'd find out about all these different voices.
But no one was trying to sell you stuff. No one was advertising to you. There was no algorithm varying stuff. There was no suggested content and stuff. So it was such a different time, such a different.
We're only giving credit to
creature.
the early days of the internet and social
We don't like
media,
it anymore.
not the modern times.
The internet also made that comics podcast possible, where I got to listen to a guy have a full crisis over Batman for kids.
Well,
right?
you jumped on podcasts so early.
Yeah.
That was like.
Oh no! I was like a big talk radio kid. I loved talk radio, just like especially like the Art Bell show. I'm really outing myself. Anybody know Art Bell? Yeah. It's like conspiracy theorists talking about UFOs and stuff, and like this guy's taking them seriously. Like, we're only going to talk about poltergeist for 30 minutes today, But like as a kid who's like into like occult stuff, and when you see Dr. Barry, you'll see I'm wearing my occult interests on my sleeve. But so like when I found out that like, wait a minute, there's like hundreds of channels where I can like tune into like weird radio, I'm in, And then I found out there's comics ones. Oh, that's my favorite subject. And the first ones were very much like fandom focused. And so it was like, oh, we're going to interview John Romita Jr. I love John Romita Jr. And then they're just talking about like, well, who's Spider-Man going to kiss this month? I'm like, well, that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear like the process. Like, how do you do it?
Oh, I like the Spider-Man kissing stuff. I want
More
that.
Spider-Man kissing.
My equivalent of that podcast thing was comic shops in the 90s. I would walk into comic shops in the 90s and they'd be like, "Are you lost, little girl?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm here to get the things." And in the 90s, the way that women were in superhero comics was totally unappealing to me and freaked me out. So I was like, no, thank you, and had to seek things out within the very narrow sort of scope of what was in comic shops. And they were also selling like Pogs and stuff.
Pogs were so cool.
Yeah.
Loved Pogs. Didn't know how to play them, but thought they were awesome.
It's not
anyway.
about playing them. But I felt very alienated by these places that I would go into now. And so it's wonderful to see comic shops now that are so welcoming and inclusive and try and get lots of different kinds of readers in and excited about comics. It's great.
That's so fascinating, though, that you felt alienated, but you still sought it out. And you kind of didn't, it bothered you, I guess. But
Yeah.
Was that part of the appeal in some way?
I don't think it was part of the appeal. I think I loved comics so much that I would face that. I would choke back my distaste for it and go in there. I had
terrible.
One of my mom's boyfriends was a comic collector, so we would go to comic shops together a lot, and he was very old school, long box guy, and he knew that I was really struggling with these shops and with the superhero comics of the 90s and kind of hated it. And so he knew comics so well that he was able to recommend, was that Valiant series? Harbinger.
Oh, yeah.
He was able to recommend Harbinger to me, and this is a very 90s, very superhero comic, so it was originally I was not interested. But they have one character who is not the typical body type of most of the women in 90s comics, and I was able to be like, that one little scrap, I'll take it. I'm getting into this series because I really like this one character who sort of subverts the body norms of the 90s women in these. Unfortunately, she was kind of treated as a joke, and her superhero power was that she could fly, and so everyone called her Zeppelin.
Oh no! Oh no!
Which is not ideal.
Oh, boy.
But they actually revamped the series a couple years ago, and it was pretty cool, and it was much more body positive, which was great. But yeah, I was like, I'll take it. So I had to kind of seek out the good in these shops that made me feel bad in various ways and try and find stuff. They did have Archie comics, which I devoured at the time. And I started reading these comics. And my dad is a literature professor, and my mom is a chef and an artist. So my dad thought that comics weren't very literary. They weren't very intellectual. And my mom thought that they were not very feminist, which is true at the time. The stuff that I was reading was not.
fair.
But I had to look at these comics really critically and be like, okay, how do I find literary redemption or like feminist redemption in these comics so that my parents will keep buying them for me? So I'd have to be like, do you know where I learned that word, Dad? I learned it from this Archie comic.
Wow.
Like in this one, Betty and Veronica don't like care about what Archie thinks of them. Isn't that cool, Mom? Like, please keep buying them for me. So I feel like I, from an early age, really had to kind of like lock in on these comics and on these comic shops and try and find it and sort of be like, I am here, I'm present, deal with me. I'm not lost. In a way that was very defiant just because I really wanted comics. I wanted that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's so cool. So we've talked a bit about how there's like there's a wealth of content and books out there for kids and younger readers. Is there anything you think is missing or you'd like to see more of? And Jerzy, I'd love to know, specifically from your experience working with the youth in your workshops, is there anything you know they want more of or they want something that's not on the shelves right now?
I mean, so these art residencies that I do, which I should say are funded by the Ohio Arts Council, this amazing state agency that puts artists in schools like up to an entire school year. I'm in career tech centers where it's 11th and 12th graders who are trying to study graphic arts. And in these career centers, you have lots of different tracks. You have like diesel repair, you have criminal justice, you have cooking, you have cosmetology. And then I'm in the computer graphic arts room with these kids who are mostly the weird, artsy kids, a lot of them queer kids. And what these kids are craving is stories where they see people who feel scared about existing in the world and finding some kind of inner strength. So from my own perspective, in The Inscrutable Dr. Bear, in the case of the Two-Faced statue, there's a horse villain named Wilhelmina. She's a barbarian horse. And it started out as the idea of like, can I do an anthropomorphic horse who is a barbarian, but don't do the Zootopia thing where she has hands. She has to move like a horse, but be a barbarian, right? It started out as just a creative challenge. But as I was writing the book, I realized this is me talking about my 10-year-old self, this scared little kid who is around a bunch of people who don't make him feel safe. And she's got to be safe in the story. But what I discovered that later. It started out as like, well, I want her to be kind of emo. She's gonna have blue and red hair. She's gonna be like kind of like some of the students that I work with all the time who want to sit in the graveyard and say life is not sweet, you know. And I remember when one of my students read the book and she was reading it in class and I didn't know, or they were reading in class and I didn't know, and they turned to me and they say, "Mr. Drozd, what the frick?" And they were really angry, and I'm like, what happened? And then I looked down, and they're reading the part where Wilhelmina, the barbarian horse, is undergoing her transformation and being seen for the first time in her life, and this kid is seeing, you know, this is a possibility for me. And I was like, I know, she's my favorite character too. And it was like this beautiful moment where every author, just like, we wanted so bad to see the moment where they emotionally connect with it. But the bigger takeaway for me is like, we need so many more books that make that kid feel like there's possibility in the world, because they don't feel like there's possibility in the world for very good reasons. So I would say, broadly speaking, that's what I want.
Yeah.
And I think it's the young people in the room right now who are going to make that happen.
Yeah.
Love that.
I have a couple. I have all of my books have been banned in various places. I know. Even my younger readers' books, which is so aggravating.
The one about babies?
Probably. I haven't looked into that one. Probably. I mean, they're all banned, whatever. But one of the books that's banned is banned for depictions of adolescent anxiety.
Whoa.
Yeah. So they don't even want to see people like dealing with anxiety and then like working through it and finding a way through that. And I found out that was the reasoning, and I was like,
Wow.
what?
Which book is that?
That's Sugar Shack, my
God.
middle grade book.
Everyone go get Sugar Shack. Request it from your library.
She has a lot of trouble with math. She has dyscalculia, and she has to make change at the farmer's market, so she gets really freaked out by it. And she has this moment of like panic attack, and it's banned. It's banned in Florida because of that. And and so when I found that out, I was like, oh, if I can get banned for that, I'm just going to make books that will definitely get banned. Like, yeah, I just want to make lots of banned books. So, I mean, I don't want them to get banned. I want them to be accessible, but you can get banned for so little now. So you might as well make work that you want to see in this world and not think about that, because they're going to find a reason. So for me, I have a 9-year-old who is non-binary. I want more non-binary representation in young readers' books. Maggie Ram is doing great things. Chad Sell has non-binary characters in his books. But I want more. I want more, please. Thank you. I want it to be, I want it to not be a big deal in a lot of these books, that it's just, like, everybody can do the pronoun thing, that it's not a big problem for people.
It's not that hard.
It's not that
It's
hard,
so not
right?
hard.
I think that if you read it, it helps to practice it, and it helps people figure out that it's, like, built into the language and it's fine. So that would be great. I would love more representation in that way, and hope to contribute to the published works that include that kind of stuff in it. I want more books about weird kids. I want more books about kids of all types getting along and having hope and feeling good in this world. And, like, yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah, to yes and that, like, something I tell my students all the time is, like, your job as young artists is to undermine everybody who looks like me. Right? That's your responsibility. And now I'll go to a more traditional source, which is C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors. He talked about how the role of the angels was to wait until the humans get here to fall at their feet, right? And I thought that's the perfect metaphor for the previous generation. The next generation is supposed to come up, and I'm supposed to fall at their feet and say thank you for what you're bringing into this world. Not every adult gets to that, right? And so I feel like that's where the artists come in, because the artists can gently and playfully undermine all that stuffy authority. And that's, like, as a teaching artist who is I'm not licensed by the state of Ohio to teach in schools, so I have to have a teacher with me. One of the things that I love about my job is I get to be the subversive agent, who is like, they can't say this, but I can. They'll get in trouble with the school if they say this, but I can say this, you know? And I feel like that's also the artist's job, is to bring that energy in. Here's an imagistic version of that. Is I was once teaching at an art center it was a lot of, like, very stodgy, old kind of art teachers there. And I was dealing with a bunch of middle graders, and the administrator said, like, we always know when you're teaching because it sounds like a wrestling match is happening upstairs, because the kids, they're being kids, right?
Yeah.
And so at one point, one of the other teachers came into my room, threw the door open, and screamed, "Other people are trying to learn here!" And I turned around to them and I said, like, "Hey, really sorry, we'll try to keep it down." She shuts the door, and I turn to the kids like, "We're not going to keep it down." You know, it's like, that's what an artist is supposed to do, is create that kind of invitation to subversion in a playful, joyful way.
That's so beautiful. And that makes me think, you know, kids' comics and graphic novels, it's a very serious pursuit, and there's a lot of responsibility to it. And it almost makes me wonder if part of the explosion, as we've been talking about, is because the industry has recognized that and recognized the importance of that, and there's been a lot of support behind it, as much as there's been pushback as well. But the perception has changed, and there's been more room for those things. Yes. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Any questions in the audience? There will be someone walking around with a microphone.
Like, be on camera.
Yes. Questions? I see a hand over here. Over here.
Thank you. So you mentioned that in the 90s, both of you felt somewhat alienated from the comic scenes for different reasons, for the gender dynamics in, like, the comic book stores and everything, and then also for, like, the treatment of kids' comics. I was wondering, did either of you like, see the Bone series by Jeff Smith during that time period? Did that help at all?
Yeah, I did read it when it came out. My wife was a big fan of Bone, and she's the one who introduced it to me. And the thing that I remember about that time was I was like, oh, wow, this is great. And then all of the news coverage in all of the magazines was like, isn't it cute? Isn't it cute that people make comics for children? It was so condescending. And if I were Jeff Smith, I would have the rage of a billion suns, and it's to his credit that he doesn't, because the way people were talking about it, because they didn't recognize the genius that it was when it was out. And thankfully somebody finally did, and it is what it is, thanks to Jeff and Vijaya, yeah.
I didn't encounter it. It wasn't in the stores I was going to. I didn't encounter Bone until I was an adult, and I was like, this rules.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, this is working? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Hi, it's really great to be hearing all of you talk. I was wondering if you had any advice for those of us cartoonists who want to be publishing in the kids scene and want to be publishing not just self-publishing and making zines, but like actually working with publishers.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you to self-publish. The publishing industry right now is very weird, but they are hungry for kids' comics, for middle grade especially. YA is becoming more popular amongst publishers, but during the pandemic, a lot of like restructuring happened within publishing, and a lot of people that don't get it as much got into it. So if you can self-publish to begin with and prove that you can actually make a book, it's a good first step to show publishers like, yes, I'm like a known quantity, I can do this. It's how I got started for sure. The industry has changed so incredibly much since I got into this like 20 some years ago. So I hesitate to be like, here's what you do. But I think agents are really good. I think that they really help you get your foot in the door with big publishers, especially a big publisher is much more likely to look at a proposal that comes from an agent, especially a known agent. The way that I found mine is that I was like, who do I like? Alison Bechdel's cool. Who's worked with her before? Okay, here's like a bunch of people that have like had interactions business-wise with her. And her former publicist was getting into agenting, and I just emailed her, and I was like, help me, please. And she's been my agent for 20 years. So,
Wow.
You know, these people are out there, and sometimes it just takes an email. It just takes meeting them at a convention like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm represented by the same agent who represents N.D. Stevenson, and obviously he spends more time attending to N.D. Stevenson than me. I am not a famous cartoonist, even though I'm sitting here. I'm like, I walk out of this place, nobody knows who I am, and I'm not saying that as like a self-deprecating joke. But what I am saying is that my conversations with him, because I do a lot of mentoring with young people who grow up in my classes, and so I'll recommend an artist to him, like, hey, this person's great. The first question he asks me is, can they finish something, right? And I think that that's something where we all have either said it ourselves or been next to somebody who's like, comics is so fun, I just love drawing all the time. What, finish 250 pages? Oh no, I can't do that. I mean, video games are really cool, you know? So yes, and what Lucy was saying is like, just proving you can finish it is the first step, and then you can say, here's a 250-page graphic novel, show it to an agent, and they say, okay, they can actually ship something. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of an important deal. And then also like finishing something and then shopping around to places like I have been published by Abrams and Macmillan, but also like the happiest place I've ever found is Iron Circus, C. Spike Trotman. I've been treated like a real artist there, whereas with some other publishers, they'll be like, well, we know you're good, but we know what people actually want, right? Which is like, that's the best thing to tell an artist, right? It's like, you're doing great, except it's not what we want. Right? And like even with Dr. Bear, which I was pitching as Hello Kitty meets Doctor Strange, or Hello Kitty meets Friday the 13th, the television series, not the one with the hockey mask. Every editor at all these publishing houses that I know personally were like, this is great, but you know what kids want? They want to look at kids. They don't want to look at animals. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, you know, it's even when you're in the publishing industry, you're dealing with a lot of assumptions and systems that don't necessarily welcome a unique voice, even though they're getting better. They're better than what it used to be, but there's still a long way to go. And I think having to, unfortunately, here I am 50 years old, and I still feel like I have to prove my case to the world every time. Jason Shiga, you guys know who Jason Shiga is? He did a book called Meanwhile, Demon. When he was trying to get Demon sold, he had just come off of an award-winning book from Abrams. And it seemed like his career was on the go. And then he's like, yeah, but I can't sell Demon. Nobody wants it. I'm like, how? How is it like Jason Shiga can't sell a book? So being published is cool, but it is no protection for your career. Like it's not like you don't just like, oh, I don't have to think about it anymore. Like you have to constantly clash against these systems and assumptions all the time, in my experience.
Yeah, you both answered that great. I think we're pretty much out of time.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
I'll just add, no, that's okay. I just want to add super quick that have an online presence, have a website where people can find you, where your contact info is easy to find, have your samples on social media, Instagram. You don't have to have 1 million followers, but my algorithm is set up so I see artists all day, every day, and it ranges from 100,000 followers to 100 followers, but editors see that, and it definitely helps. And then seek out the assistants or the people starting out in the industry. You don't have to find the person who's the most established on the publishing side. Connecting with assistant editors, new agents, they want to grow their list and grow with you. So that's maybe more valuable than the higher ups who are super busy with meetings all day, speaking from experience.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you all for being here.
Oh, we're doing a signing. So if
Yeah.
you didn't get your question answered,